Welcome back. I'm Avi Lewis, and we're on the map. Whatever promises G8 leaders make to Africa later this week, after they've worked out whatever backroom deal they're working out right now, the people of that continent have every reason to be skeptical. The historic, euphoric commitments of Gleneagles 2 years ago were the high point of hope for real action from the G8. Since then, well, let's take a look back at promises made and promises broken.
This is what we declare. We are going to be held to this, we're bound by it, we're committed to it, and judge us by it.
In Scotland, G8 leaders promised to double annual aid to Africa within 5 years. A tall order. But in the moment, the passion seemed sincere.
If we implement this, we will make poverty history.
Just 1 year later, total aid from rich countries actually dropped. That's right, they're giving less.
Hey, we're achieving our targets.
Canada's aid fell by 9% and the U.S. by more than 20%. On AIDS, leaders promised Africa, in fact the whole world, universal access to antiretrovirals by 2010.
By 2010, is it?
But contributions to the Global AIDS Fund have simply not materialized. This year, the fund is $8 billion short. Next year, it'll be $10 billion short. At the current rate, fewer than half the people in need of urgent treatment will get it. On AIDS, we're going backwards. G8 leaders promised to write off the debts of the 18 poorest African countries.
You got people here who are working to alleviate poverty.
But debts to the World Bank and IMF have only been reduced, not cancelled outright, leaving these heavily indebted poor countries on the hook for $1.5 billion of interest this year alone. And that is more than they saved from the so-called debt relief they got in the first place. Perhaps the G8's most promising promise was its pledge to cut agricultural subsidies. Rich country handouts to agribusiness giants have a devastating effect on farmers in Africa. Cheap grain, dairy, and meat are dumped into African markets, putting farmers out of business by the millions. Meanwhile, high tariffs keep African products out of G8 supermarkets. In 2005, the Gleneagles promise was to finally level the playing field. And yet that very year, the U.S. bumped up its subsidies to agriculture from $4.5 to $14 billion. What was it again the G8 said about promises to Africa?
This is what we declare. We are going to be held to this, we're bound by it, we're committed to it, and judge us by it.
Okay, fast forward to this week at the G8. Bono's backup campaigner, Bob Geldof, is accusing Canada of working behind the scenes to water down this year's G8 commitment to Africa. Prime Minister Stephen Harper shot back that was untrue, saying, quote, "We are on the way to fulfilling the promises we made of doubling humanitarian aid to Africa." Now, first of all, in an eerie similarity to its plan for climate change, the Harper government is starting from a different baseline than the one used by the Martin government, which made the commitment in the first place. In this case, it's a baseline which just happens to make fulfilling the promise $400 million cheaper. But more importantly, despite the Prime Minister's reassurances, Canada is way behind schedule on this promise. According to the NGO data, Canada has only pledged $160 million to Africa this year. In order to get caught up, we need to be at almost 5 times that. So if the Prime Minister is serious about getting us on track to make our Gleneagles commitment, he better find us a high-speed train. Shouldn't be too hard to find in Germany. Tomorrow night, we bring African voices to the G8 debate about Africa. And Paul Martin on the shattered promises of Gleneagles. Then the Bonoization of aid. Can you shop your way to global justice and kumbaya world leaders into doing the right thing? And then on Thursday, in a week full of anniversaries, we take another look at Tiananmen Square, a new version of the history that turns the official story upside down. See you next time on The Map. Stick around for the hour.